Dr. Eliza Martinez stared at the approaching ship through the viewport of the USS Endeavour. The vessel was unlike anything she had seen before, smooth, almost organic in appearance, with a surface that seemed to shift colors like oil on water. All hands to alert stations. Captain William Harris's voice came through the ship's comm system. Unknown vessel approaching. Not responding to hails. Eliza hurried to the medical bay. As the ship's chief medical officer, her place during potential emergencies was with her equipment and supplies. She had served on the Endeavour for 3 years now, but her instincts from her days as a combat medic during the Third Martian conflict still guided her actions. The ship lurched suddenly. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the dim red glow of emergency power. "We've lost main power," Engineer Frank Whitman reported over the comms. "Some kind of energy pulse hit us. Engines are offline, life support running on backup." Eliza secured loose medical equipment as the ship drifted. Her hands moved quickly, efficiently, muscle memory from years of emergency situations. The ship shuddered again. This time, Eliza heard the unmistakable sound of metal against metal. They were being boarded. "All crew, prepare for possible hostile contact," Captain Harris ordered. "Security teams to access points. Non-essential personnel, secure yourselves in designated safe areas." Eliza reached for the drawer where she kept her personal sidearm. The weight of the weapon was familiar in her hand. She had hoped never to need it again after leaving military service, but she kept her skills sharp. Just in case, the medical bay doors slid open. Eliza raised her weapon, then lowered it when she saw Lieutenant Olivia Jackson stumble in, helping a crew member with a bleeding head wound. "They're inside," Olivia said, her voice tight with tension. "Some kind of creatures. They have weapons that don't kill, they just drop you where you stand." Peterson here hit his head when he fell. Eliza moved to help the injured crewman. "What do they look like? Tall, blue skin?" "4 eyes," Olivia shook her head. "They move fast, really fast." The lights in the medical bay suddenly brightened, then dimmed again. A high-pitched whine filled the air, rising in intensity until Eliza had to cover her ears. Olivia and Peterson collapsed to the floor. Eliza felt a wave of dizziness but remained standing, gripping the edge of an exam table for support. The doors to the medical bay opened again. This time, the figures that entered were not human. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, with slender bodies covered in blue-tinted skin that seemed to pulse with an inner light. 4 eyes, 2 large ones in the normal position and 2 smaller ones set wider on their elongated heads blinked at her with vertical pupils. They wore what appeared to be form-fitting armor that moved like liquid with their bodies. One of the creatures pointed a device at Eliza. She raised her weapon, but her arm felt heavy, unresponsive. The creature made a series of clicking sounds. Another creature responded with similar sounds, then approached her. It held up a small disc-shaped object that projected symbols in the air between them. "Subject remains conscious." A flat, artificial voice emerged from the device. "Interesting resistance to neural disruptor." Eliza tried to back away, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. "Who are you? What do you want?" The creature's 4 eyes blinked. In sequence, the translation device hummed. "We are Krozl. You're human. We study. We learn." More of the aliens entered the medical bay. They examined the unconscious forms of Olivia and Peterson with cold efficiency. One of them approached Eliza with another device. This one emitted a soft blue light that swept over her body. "This one different," the translator said. "Medical designation, healer." The apparent leader of the group stepped closer to Eliza. It was taller than the others, with darker blue skin marked with intricate patterns. It studied her with all 4 eyes, then made a series of rapid clicking sounds. "You will observe," the translation came. "You will document human limitations." Eliza felt her heart race. What does that mean? What are you going to do? The alien didn't respond directly. Instead, it gave orders to the others, who began moving through the medical bay, examining equipment and supplies with methodical precision. "Take selected specimens," the leader commanded through the translator. "This one comes to observation. Chamber. Two of the aliens gripped Eliza's arms. She tried to resist, but her body still felt heavy, unresponsive. They dragged her from the medical bay into the corridor. Throughout the ship, she saw her crewmates lying unconscious. The aliens were examining them, seemingly sorting them into categories. Some were being carried away, while others were left where they had fallen. "What are you doing to them?" Eliza demanded. "They need medical attention." The leader, walking ahead of her, turned its head. "Specimens will be maintained at necessary life functions. No permanent damage at this stage of study." This stage? Eliza felt cold fear spread through her chest. They brought her to the ship's large conference room, now transformed. The long table had been removed, replaced by strange equipment that hummed and pulsed with light. In the center of the room, 4 medical beds had been arranged in a semicircle. Each one was surrounded by monitoring equipment that looked similar to, but more advanced than her own medical tech. To her horror, she saw Captain Harris, Lieutenant Jackson, who must have been brought from the medical bay, Engineer Whitman, and communications specialist Daniel Rodriguez being secured to the beds by the aliens. "Why them? What are you doing?" Eliza struggled against her captors, feeling some strength returning to her limbs. The leader approached her again. "Selected for physical and psychological diversity. Optimal study group." It gestured to an empty chair positioned to face the 4 beds. "You will sit, you will observe. You will assist in maintaining specimen viability. I will not help you experiment on my crew," Eliza said. Her voice low and dangerous. The alien's 4 eyes blinked in that strange sequential pattern. "You misunderstand. Not optional. You watch, or we increase pain stimulus to all specimens." As if to demonstrate, the alien touched a control on its wrist device. Captain Harris's body suddenly arched in pain, though he remained unconscious. "Stop!" Eliza shouted. "Stop it now!" The alien complied, and the captain's body relaxed. "You understand position now. You observe, you provide medical intervention when we allow. You learn what we wish to know." They forced her into the chair and secured her wrists to the armrests. The restraints were unlike anything she'd seen before. They seemed almost alive, molding to her skin. "Why are you doing this?" Eliza asked, trying to keep her voice steady as she watched her friends and colleagues lying helpless before her. The leader's translator took a moment before responding. "Knowledge. Pain response unique to each species. Humans interesting, fragile yet resilient. We study limits. We document responses." Eliza felt sick. These creatures, these Krasl, were going to torture her crew while forcing her to watch. To help keep them alive for more torture. What the aliens didn't know was that Dr. Eliza Martinez wasn't just any medical officer. Before joining the space fleet, she had been a combat medic who had seen the worst of what humans could do to each other during the Third Martian conflict. She knew how to heal, yes, but she also knew precisely how to hurt, how to kill. Her knowledge of anatomy wasn't just for saving lives. As the aliens began preparing their equipment, Eliza watched them carefully. She memorized their movements, noted the way their bodies worked, observed the seemingly translucent area where their necks met their shoulders. She saw how they communicated, how they moved, how they used their devices. The Krasl had made a critical mistake. They had captured a human healer and thought they were gaining an assistant. What they'd actually done was give their most dangerous enemy a front row seat to study them right back. Dr. Eliza Martinez took a deep breath and began to plan. 3 days had passed since the capture of the USS Endeavour. Dr. Eliza Martinez's wrists were raw from testing her restraints when the aliens weren't watching. She had been allowed brief periods of freedom only to tend to her crew's most critical needs. Always under the watchful eyes of at least 2 Krasl guards, the alien scientists had begun their experiments in earnest. Each of her crewmates was subjected to different tests, all designed to measure human limits of endurance. Captain William Harris lay on the first bed, his normally commanding presence reduced to a test subject. The Krasl were testing his response to temperature extremes. Over the past hours, they had lowered his body temperature to near hypothermic levels, then rapidly raised it until sweat poured from his skin. Throughout it all, they kept him conscious but unable to move, a neural blocker of some kind paralyzing his body while leaving his mind and senses intact. Temperature variation tolerance exceptional, noted the lead scientist through its translator. Subject maintains consciousness through range that would incapacitate lesser species. Eliza bit her lip as she watched Harris's eyes, the only part of him able to move freely. He was in pain, but there was something else there, a message. He blinked 3 times slowly, then twice quickly. An old combat signal, I'm okay. Stay strong. On the second bed, Lieutenant Olivia Jackson endured gravitational pressure tests. The Krazel had some device that could create localized gravity fields. They increased the pressure on different parts of her body, measuring how her bones and organs responded. Eliza had been permitted to apply regenerative patches when Jackson's ribs had cracked under the pressure. Apply minimal treatment, the Krazel supervisor had instructed. Sufficient only for continued testing. Engineer Frank Whitman occupied the third bed, subjected to sensory overload experiments. The aliens bombarded him with lights, sounds, and tactile stimulations beyond normal human tolerance. His eyes were kept open with small devices, forcing him to process the overwhelming sensory input without the relief of looking away or blinking. On the fourth bed lay communications specialist Daniel Rodriguez. His torment was different, psychological, rather than physical. The Krazel kept him in a state of sleep deprivation, allowing him to drift almost to sleep before jolting him awake with sudden stimuli. They also used some kind of device that seemed to project images directly into his mind, studying his emotional responses to various scenarios. Human mental resilience unexpected, the lead scientist commented. Subject continues to resist despite prolonged manipulation. Eliza had been given limited access to her medical kit. The aliens were curious about human medical techniques and allowed her to demonstrate basic procedures when one of the test subjects approached dangerous levels of physical distress. During one such intervention, when she was treating a particularly severe burn on Captain Harris's arm, she managed to whisper to him, "Where are the others?" She asked, her lips barely moving as she applied a cooling gel to his skin. Harris's eyes flickered toward the door, then up. Stasis. Upper level, he managed through clenched teeth. Eliza nodded slightly, continuing her treatment. This confirmed what she had suspected. The rest of the crew was being kept somewhere else on what she now realized was not just a ship, but a massive research vessel. The conference room of the Endeavor had been converted into just one of what must be many testing chambers. The lead Krazel scientist approached, its 4 eyes blinking in that strange, sequential pattern Eliza had begun to recognize as indicating interest. Explain procedure, it demanded through the translator. Eliza kept her voice steady, professional. I'm applying a regenerative compound to the damaged tissue. It promotes healing and prevents infection. The alien leaned closer, studying her hands as she worked. Primitive, but effective. Your species relies heavily on chemical interventions rather than energy manipulation. We work with what we have, Eliza replied, carefully gauging the alien's reactions. She had been observing them closely, looking for patterns, weaknesses, anything that might help. She had noticed several things. The Krazel were nocturnal by nature. They dimmed the lights during what she assumed was their active period and seemed slightly sluggish when the lights were at their brightest. They also had a strict hierarchy with clear deference shown to the lead scientist. Most importantly, she had confirmed that the junction where their necks met their shoulders contained vital circulatory structures. The blue skin there was nearly translucent, and she could see the pulse of what must be their equivalent of blood. Vessel's dot, as she finished treating Harris, Lieutenant Jackson caught her eye from the next bed. Jackson had been mapping the layout of the ship during her transfers to and from various testing chambers. She blinked a pattern that Eliza recognized from their emergency training, 4 groups of blinks, representing directions and distances. Jackson was telling her there was an access point 20 meters east of their current position. The Krazel pulled Eliza away once she finished treating Harris. Return to observation position, it ordered. Back in her chair, Eliza continued to watch and learn. The aliens communicated primarily through telepathy among themselves, using the translation devices only when they needed to address her. This explained their limited verbal communication and their tendency to work in silent coordination. Engineer Whitman, during a brief respite from his sensory tests, managed to communicate with hand signals while appearing to simply flex his cramped fingers. He indicated that the ship's systems had similarities to human technology: power conduits, life support, propulsion. His message was clear: these systems could be overloaded if accessed. Rodriguez, despite his psychological torment, remained remarkably aware. When the aliens reviewed his responses on a display screen positioned where Eliza could see it, he deliberately focused on certain memory's technical specifications, security protocols, aspects of the Endeavor systems that might be useful. Night and day lost meaning in the windowless chamber, but Eliza tracked time by the shift changes of the Kruzul researchers. She estimated they had been captive for nearly 5 days when she was given an unexpected opportunity. The lead scientist approached her chair. "You will demonstrate human surgical techniques," it announced. "We observe differences in methodology." Eliza kept her expression neutral, hiding the surge of hope. "I need my full medical kit for that." The alien considered this, its 4 eyes blinking in that particular pattern she now recognized as assessment. Acceptable, under supervision. 2 guards escorted her to what remained of the Endeavor's medical bay. Most of the equipment had been removed or damaged during the initial capture, but her personal medical kit remained intact in its storage locker. The kit contained her surgical instruments, including several scalpels of varying sizes and purposes. As the guards watched, she carefully selected what she would need, making sure to include certain tools that weren't strictly necessary for demonstration purposes. Among these was a basic tissue regenerator, a device that emitted specific frequencies to stimulate cell growth. Eliza knew from her studies of xenobiology that certain frequencies could disrupt the neural patterns of species that relied on telepathic communication. As she gathered her supplies, she also noted the location of the ship's sedatives in a nearby cabinet. The Kruzul had left them, probably considering them too primitive to be of interest. Eliza knew different. As a combat medic, she had learned that anything that could heal could also harm if used with that intent. The right dose of sedative in the wrong place could be lethal. When the guards weren't looking, she palmed a vial and slipped it into her pocket. "I'm ready," she told the guards, picking up her medical kit with steady hands, the plan forming in. Her mind was dangerous, desperate even. But as they led her back toward her suffering crew, Eliza felt a cold determination settle over her. The Kruzul had made a critical mistake. They had given a combat-trained human medic access to her weapons of choice. Eliza stood before the lead Kruzul scientist, her medical kit open on a small table beside her. 4 guards watched from the corners of the room. Her crew remained strapped to their beds, their eyes following her movements with cautious hope. "Demonstrate human surgical technique," the lead scientist ordered through its translator. Eliza nodded, keeping her face neutral despite the plan forming in her mind. "I'll need a surface to work on, and something to demonstrate with." The alien considered. This then gestured to one of the guards. It brought forward a flat panel that unfurled into a table. Another guard placed what appeared to be a synthetic block of tissue on the surface. "Artificial organic matter," the lead scientist explained. "Similar to human tissue density. Proceed." Eliza arranged her tools carefully, making sure the scalpels were placed near the edge of the table closest to Captain Harris. She picked up a tissue scanner and began her demonstration. "Human surgery begins with detailed scanning and planning," she explained, running the device over the synthetic tissue. "We need to understand what we're cutting before we make the first incision." The aliens watched with all 4 eyes focused intently. Eliza noted how they clustered together, their telepathic communication evident in their synchronized movements. As she worked, Eliza subtly adjusted the tissue regenerator she had brought. The device was designed to emit specific frequencies to stimulate cell growth, but with small modifications, it could produce different frequencies altogether. "This regenerator helps repair damaged tissue," she explained, holding it up for the aliens to see. It stimulates cellular activity through controlled frequency emissions. She activated the device, pretending to demonstrate its effect on the synthetic tissue. What the aliens didn't realize was that she had adjusted it to a frequency that would interfere with their telepathic communication. Not enough to be immediately noticeable, but enough to create confusion if activated at full power. The lead scientist leaned in closer. Primitive technology. Interesting application. Eliza continued. Her demonstration, moving on to the scalpels. These are basic cutting tools. Different sizes and shapes for different purposes. She picked up a scalpel and made a precise incision in the synthetic tissue. The material parted easily like real flesh. She was aware of the guards shifting positions, moving closer to observe. The human body is complex, she continued, making another cut. A good surgeon knows exactly where to cut to heal. She paused, looking directly at the lead scientist. And where to cut to cause damage. The alien's 4 eyes blinked in that pattern she now recognized as curiosity. Explain. Medical knowledge is double-edged, Eliza said. To know how to heal, you must understand how harm occurs. Every doctor knows the most vulnerable points of the body. This seemed to intrigue the alien. It made a series of clicking sounds to the others, then turned back to Eliza. You will explain human vulnerabilities. Eliza nodded slowly, seeing an opportunity. I can show you on a diagram. She picked up a medical tablet from her kit and activated it. The screen displayed a human anatomical diagram. As the aliens gathered closer to see, Eliza continued her. Real work. She subtly tested the modified tissue regenerator, increasing its output slightly. One of the guards shook its head, as if trying to clear it. The carotid artery here, she said, pointing to the neck on the diagram. Major blood vessel. Critical for blood flow to the brain. While the aliens were focused on the diagram, Eliza carefully palmed the small scalpel. With practiced movements from years of surgery, she slipped it into her sleeve. The human heart, she continued, tapping the screen. Vulnerable, but protected by the ribcage, Captain Harris caught her eye. He had been watching her closely, understanding that she was planning something. He gave a tiny nod, then looked meaningfully at his restraints. Eliza understood. She needed to get him free. She shifted her position slightly, angling herself so that the aliens would have to turn away from Harris to see her demonstration. The spine contains the central nervous system, she explained, pointing to the diagram again. Damage here can cause paralysis. As she spoke, she deliberately knocked several instruments from the table. They clattered to the floor near Harris's bed. Apologies, she said, bending to pick them up. As she did, she whispered to Harris, Be ready. When I activate the device, you'll have a few seconds. Harris blinked once in acknowledgement. The lead scientist made an impatient sound. Continue demonstration. Eliza straightened, tools in hand. Yes, of course. She placed the instruments back on the table, making sure one small scalpel remained hidden in her palm. She continued her explanation of human anatomy, gradually steering the conversation toward the aliens themselves. I've noticed similarities between human and Krasov physiology, she said carefully. Your species also has central circulation points. She gestured vaguely toward the neck-shoulder junction, where she had observed their pulse points. The lead scientist seemed pleased by her observation. Yes, evolutionary convergence. Efficient design. I'm curious about your neural structure, Eliza said. Your telepathic abilities suggest a complex brain organization? This was clearly a point of pride for the aliens. The lead scientist stepped closer, superior to human neural pathways. We share thoughts directly. No primitive sound vibrations? Needed. While they were distracted by this conversation, Eliza had been working on the tissue regenerator. A few more adjustments, and it would emit a frequency that would temporarily disrupt their telepathic communication completely. She had also been carefully measuring the sedative she had stolen. During her years as a combat medic, Eliza had learned exactly how various drugs affected different physiologies. Based on her observations of the Krasal, She had calculated a dose that would be lethal to them, using techniques learned in field hospitals where resources were scarce. She had concealed the loaded syringe in her hand alongside the scalpel. Lieutenant Jackson caught her eye from the next bed over. Like Harris, she had been watching Eliza's preparations. Jackson blinked a pattern, 3 long, 2 short. The old combat signal for ready to move. Eliza gave a tiny nod, then turned back to the lead scientist. I'd like to demonstrate a more complex procedure, she said. Could you move the synthetic tissue closer to the light? As the alien adjusted the position of the practice material, Eliza saw her opportunity. The guards had relaxed slightly, convinced she was complying with their demands. She reached for the tissue regenerator with her free hand, positioning her thumb over the activation switch she had modified. This procedure requires precise control, she said, picking up another scalpel with her other hand. The first incision must be exact. She made a show of concentrating on the synthetic tissue, leaning forward as if focusing intently. This brought her closer to Harris's bed. Watch closely, she said to the aliens. Then, in one fluid motion, Eliza dropped the hidden scalpel next to Harris's hand and activated the modified tissue regenerator at full power. The effect was immediate. The Krozal staggered, their 4 eyes blinking rapidly in confusion. Their telepathic connection, clearly vital to their coordination, was disrupted by the frequency emissions. In the moment of chaos, Harris grasped the scalpel and began cutting. Through his restraints, Eliza didn't waste the opportunity. She lunged toward the nearest guard, the loaded syringe extended. With practiced precision, she drove the needle into the vulnerable junction of its neck and shoulder, injecting the concentrated sedative directly into what she had identified as a major blood vessel. The guard collapsed almost instantly, its blue skin turning a dull gray. The lead scientist recovered faster than the others, reaching for a weapon at its side. Eliza grabbed the largest scalpel from her kit and moved with the speed and precision of someone who had performed surgery under artillery fire. The blade sliced across the alien's exposed neck junction, cutting deep into the vital vessels she had observed. Blue fluid sprayed from the wound as the scientist fell. Harris had freed himself and was already cutting Jackson loose. Eliza tossed him the tissue regenerator. Keep it active, she shouted. It disrupts their telepathy. The remaining guards were starting to recover, reaching for their weapons. Eliza grabbed more scalpels from her kit. Her mind cold and focused, years of medical training had taught her exactly where to cut to save a life. Years of combat experience had taught her where to cut to end one. As the third Krozal guard raised its weapon, Eliza's hand moved with surgical precision. A plan was in motion. Now came the hard part. The medical bay erupted into chaos. The third Krozal guard fired its weapon, but the disruption from the tissue regenerator affected its aim. The energy pulse hit the wall behind Eliza, sending sparks flying. Eliza didn't hesitate. She threw a scalpel with deadly accuracy, hitting the guard in the vulnerable neck-shoulder junction. The alien dropped its weapon and clutched at the wound, blue fluid seeping between its fingers. Harris, the control panel! Eliza shouted, pointing to a console near the door. Captain Harris, now free from his restraints, lunged for the panel. His legs were weak from days of immobility, but adrenaline carried him forward. He reached the console and began pressing buttons, trying to make sense of the alien technology. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Jackson had freed herself and was working on Engineer Whitman's restraints. Communications Specialist Rodriguez remained secured to his bed. Still weak from the psychological testing, the fourth guard moved toward Rodriguez, weapon raised. Eliza saw the threat and grabbed a surgical bone saw from her kit. She leapt across the room, her combat training taking over. The saw wasn't designed as a weapon, but in her hands it became one. She drove it into the guard's side. Finding the gap in its armor that she had observed days earlier, the guard made a high-pitched keening sound and fell to its knees. Eliza quickly retrieved its weapon and tossed it to Jackson. Figure out how? It works, she ordered, then turned to help Rodriguez. The young communications specialist was pale and shaking, but his eyes were clear. About time, Doc, he whispered as she cut through his restraints. Can you walk? Eliza asked, helping him sit up. Rodriguez nodded weakly. Just give me a minute. We don't have a minute, Eliza said, scanning the room. The tissue regenerator was still active, its modified frequency keeping the alien's telepathic abilities disrupted. But she didn't know how long the effect would last, or if reinforcements were already on the way. At the control panel, Harris had made progress. I think I've found the ship's system interface, he called out. Whitman, I need you here. Engineer Whitman, now free, joined the captain at the panel. Despite his ordeal, Whitman's technical mind quickly grasped the alien technology. It's similar to our systems, but more advanced, he said, his fingers moving across the controls. I think I can ... Yes. The screen changed, displaying what appeared to be a ship layout. Can you locate the rest of the crew? Eliza asked, supporting Rodriguez as they moved toward the panel. Whitman nodded, his focus intense. They're in stasis pods on the upper level, just as Harris said. 2 decks up. Can you release them remotely? Jackson asked, examining the alien weapon she'd been given. Whitman shook his head. Not from here. We need to reach the stasis control room. He pointed to a location on the display. Eliza studied the ship layout. We need to move fast before they realize what's happening. Jackson, can you use that weapon? Jackson had figured out the basic operation of the alien device. I think so. Point and press this indentation. Simple enough? Good, you take point, Eliza said. Harris, help Rodriguez. Whitman, stay in the middle and guide us. I'll take rear guard. Eliza retrieved more scalpels from her medical kit and tucked them into her uniform pockets. She also grabbed several vials of sedative and loaded them into syringes. These she distributed to her crewmates. Aim for the neck-shoulder junction, she instructed. Direct injection into their circulatory system. It works fast. The crew moved toward the door. Before opening it, Eliza picked up the tissue regenerator. We need to keep this running as long as possible, she said. It's our best advantage, Harris nodded grimly. Let's move. Jackson opened the door cautiously, the alien weapon ready. The corridor outside was empty, but alarm signals flashed along the walls. Their escape had been noticed. The crew moved as quickly as they could through the alien vessel. Jackson in front, weapon raised. Harris supporting the still weak Rodriguez. Whitman in the middle, consulting the memorized ship layout. And Eliza bringing up the rear, medical tools ready as weapons. They encountered 2 more Crozzle guards at a junction. Jackson fired the alien weapon, hitting one square in the chest. It fell without a sound. The second guard charged forward, but Eliza was ready. She threw a scalpel with surgical precision, catching the alien in one of its smaller eyes. As it staggered, Harris broke away from Rodriguez and tackled the creature to the ground. The neck! Eliza shouted, tossing him a loaded syringe. Harris drove the needle home, and the guard went still almost instantly. We need to hurry, Whitman urged. The stasis control room is just ahead. They reached a sealed door. Whitman examined the access panel beside it. I can bypass this, but it will take a minute. Make it fast, Eliza said, her eyes scanning the corridor behind them. They'll be regrouping soon. While Whitman worked on the door, Rodriguez had recovered. Enough strength to stand on his own, he approached Eliza. I've been thinking about their communication system, he said quietly. If we could amplify that disruption frequency from the regenerator, broadcast it throughout the ship, ... Eliza nodded. It would buy us time, she handed him the device. Can you modify it further? Rodriguez, the communications specialist, examined. The regenerator, I think so. If we can connect it to their internal communication system. The door slid open under Whitman's efforts. The stasis control room beyond was unoccupied. Banks of equipment lined the walls with the central console, dominating the space. Through a large viewport, they could see rows of stasis pods, each containing a member of the Endeavor's crew. There they are, Harris said, moving to the viewport. How do we release them? Whitman went straight to the main console. This controls the stasis fields. I need a few minutes to figure it out. Rodriguez, work on that frequency amplification, Eliza ordered. Jackson, Harris, guard the door. As Whitman and Rodriguez worked, Elisa scanned the stasis chamber beyond the viewport. Dozens of crew members floated in suspended animation, unaware of what had happened. She also noticed something else: stasis pods containing other beings. Not human, other test subjects. "Whitman," she said, pointing to the alien subjects. "Can you release them too?" The engineer looked up from his work. "I think so. All the pods seem to be on the same system." "Do it," Eliza decided. "They might help create more confusion." Suddenly, an alarm blared throughout the ship. Red lights pulsed along the ceiling. "They're organizing a response," Jackson warned from the doorway. "We don't have much time." Rodriguez looked up from the modified regenerator. "I've got it. If we connect this to that communication node, it should broadcast the disruption frequency ship-wide." He pointed to what appeared to be a communication terminal. Eliza helped him connect the device. As soon as they activated it, the effect was immediate. The alarm sounds became erratic, then stopped altogether. "It's working," Rodriguez said. "Their systems are linked to their telepathic network. We're disrupting everything." At the main console, Whitman gave a shout of triumph. "I've got it, releasing stasis fields now." Through the viewport, they watched as the stasis pods began to open. Crew members stirred, confusion evident on their faces as they awoke. "We need to get 'em out of there," Harris said, "and we need weapons." Eliza nodded. "There's an access door to the stasis chamber on the left." Jackson, Harris, go help the crew. "Whitman, can you lock down sections of the ship to slow down the Krozl?" The engineer nodded, his fingers flying over the controls. "Already on it. I'm sealing bulkheads between us and their main gathering areas." As Jackson and Harris left to help the awakening crew, Eliza turned to Rodriguez. "How long will that disruption last?" The communications specialist shook his head. "The regenerator wasn't designed for this. Maybe 30 minutes before it burns out." "That's not much time," Eliza said grimly. She moved to the control panel where Whitman worked. "We need to find a way off this ship. Can you access their navigation systems?" Whitman nodded, opening new screens on the console. "They've moved us far from where they captured us. We're in deep space." "Escape pods?" Eliza asked. "Better," Whitman said, a smile breaking across his tired face. "They've docked the Endeavor in their landing bay. It's damaged but might be repairable." For the first time since their capture, Eliza felt real hope. But she knew the hardest part was still ahead. The Krozl would not let their test subjects escape easily. 2 hours after their escape began, Eliza Martinez stood on the bridge of the USS Endeavor. The ship hummed with emergency power as engineer Whitman and his team worked to restore the main systems. Around her, crew members moved with purpose. Despite their ordeal, running diagnostics and preparing for departure, Captain Harris sat in the command chair. His face still pale from the Krozl experiments, but his eyes clear and focused. "Status report," he ordered. "Life support stable on." "Emergency power," reported Lieutenant Jackson from her station. "Weapons offline, shields at 30%, engine status?" Harris asked. Whitman's voice came through the CUM system. "Main drives damaged but functional. We can reach 60% thrust. It'll be enough to break orbit and make it to the nearest outpost." Eliza listened to the reports while treating a crew member's injured arm. Her medical bay had been mostly destroyed during the capture, so she worked from a makeshift station on the bridge. Her surgical tools, so recently used as weapons, were now back to their intended purpose. The escape from the Krozl research vessel had been chaotic but successful. After releasing the crew from stasis, they had fought their way to the landing bay where the Endeavor was docked. Rodriguez's modified disruptor had given them the advantage, confusing the aliens and preventing their coordinated response. What had turned the tide completely was the release of the other test subjects. Various alien species, also prisoners of the Krozl, had joined the humans in fighting for freedom. Their combined rebellion had overwhelmed the research vessel's security forces. "Communications?" Harris asked. Rodriguez, now recovered enough to man his station, shook his head. "Long-range comms are down, short-range still functional. We can send a distress signal once we're closer to trade routes. Do it, Harris ordered. And maintain alert status? We don't know if they'll pursue? The captain turned to Eliza. Doctor, casualty report? 12 crew members with serious injuries, all stable, she reported. Everyone suffered some effects from stasis, but they're recovering quickly. No fatalities. Harris nodded, relief evident. In his eyes, that's something at least. Eliza finished bandaging her patient and moved to the captain's side. What about the other prisoners we released? She asked quietly. Most escaped on Crozzle shuttles, Harris replied. A few asked to come with us. Those 3 in engineering helping Whitman. The ship shuddered slightly as the engines powered. Up, through the viewport, Eliza could see the massive research vessel growing smaller as they pulled away. Its sleek, organic shape now seemed menacing rather than fascinating. Ready for departure, Jackson announced. Course set for Outpost Gamma 7. Engage. Harris ordered. The Endeavour lurched forward, then smoothed out as Whitman adjusted the damaged engines. The stars outside began to shift as they moved away from the Crozzle vessel. Eliza gripped the back of the captain's chair, watching the alien ship recede. Do you think they'll report this? Tell others about us? Harris's expression darkened. Count on it. The Crozzle seemed well connected. This won't be the last we hear of them. 3 days later, the USS Endeavour limped into orbit around Outpost Gamma 7, a small space fleet station near the border of explored space. Their distress signal had been received, and medical teams waited in the docking bay as the damaged ship made port. Eliza worked alongside the station's medical staff, transferring her patients and briefing the chief medical officer on the Crozzle experiments. The crew was quarantined as a precaution, though Eliza had found no evidence of alien contamination. A week after their arrival, Eliza sat in a debriefing room with Captain Harris, Lieutenant Jackson, Engineer Whitman, and Specialist Rodriguez. Across from them sat Admiral Lavra Bennett, the highest-ranking officer at the outpost. Your report makes for disturbing reading, Doctor, Admiral Bennett said, looking up from her tablet. These Crozzle pose a significant threat to human exploration. They're scientists without ethics, Eliza replied. They see other species as nothing more than test subjects. The Admiral nodded. Intelligence is analyzing the data you retrieve from their systems. Preliminary findings suggest the Crozzle have been conducting these experiments for centuries on dozens of species. What about the aliens we released? Harris asked. Have any of them made contact? 2 species have, Bennett confirmed. They've, proposed a mutual defense agreement. It seems your escape has created an impromptu alliance. Rodriguez leaned forward. Admiral, the telepathic disruption technology we developed, it could be vital if we encounter the Crozzle again. R&D is already working on it, Bennett assured him. Your modifications to that tissue regenerator might save countless lives. The Admiral turned to Eliza. Dr. Martinez, I want to specifically address your actions during this incident. Eliza straightened in her chair. She had broken her oath as a doctor, used her medical knowledge to kill rather than heal. She was prepared to face the consequences. Your quick thinking and decisive action saved your crew, Admiral Bennett continued. However, the methods employed raise certain ethical questions. The Space Fleet Medical Board will want a full report. I understand, Admiral, Eliza said quietly. I did what was necessary to save my crew. Bennett's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, Doctor, I believe most of us would have done the same in your position. After the debriefing, Eliza stood alone at a viewport, looking out at the stars. She felt someone approach and turned to see Captain Harris. Pennyfor. Your thoughts, Doctor? He asked, standing beside her. I'm wondering if I can go back, she admitted, to being just a healer again. Harris was silent for a moment. You know, during the Mars conflict, I had a medic in my unit. After a particularly bad firefight, he told me something I never forgot. He said, the best doctors understand exactly how fragile life is because they've seen it broken. That's what makes them fight so hard to preserve it, Eliza nodded slowly. I just never thought I'd use that knowledge the way I did. You did what was necessary, Harris said firmly. And you showed those aliens something important, that humans protect their own. 2 months later, the USS Endeavour, fully repaired and upgraded with new defensive systems, prepared to leave Outpost Gamma 7. Eliza stood in her rebuilt medical bay, organizing supplies. The door slid open and Lieutenant Jackson entered. "Ready for departure, Doctor?" she asked. Eliza looked around at her medical equipment, the tools of healing arranged neatly on shelves and in drawers. Among them was a new device, a refined version of the telepathic disruptor Rodriguez had created, now standard issue on all Space Fleet vessels. "Yes," she said, picking up her medical tablet. "I'm ready." As the Endeavour pulled away from the station, a communication came through from Fleet Command. Reports indicated Krasl vessels had been spotted near human colonies. Their mission was to investigate and, if necessary, defend those colonies. Captain Harris gathered his senior staff on the bridge. "This won't be easy," he told them. "The Krasl now know what humans are capable of. They'll be prepared." Eliza thought of all she had learned during their captivity about the aliens, about her crew, and about herself. She had gone beyond her training as a healer, found strength she didn't know she possessed. "So will we, Captain," she said. "So will we." The Endeavour entered warp drive, streaking away toward the edge of human space, carrying with it the warning that would soon spread throughout the galaxy. Those who threatened humans would discover that even their healers could become warriors when necessary. The Krasl had made Eliza watch her crew suffer. In doing so, they had created their most dangerous enemy, a human who knew exactly where to cut.